Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Walters, and this is my colleague Christopher Daley from Brunel University London. In this presentation, we'd like to share the results of research we undertook in measuring the transition to open scholarship at Brunel and compare the effects of fostering genuine cultural change through policy. Reflected in our poster outside, we discovered a more complete picture of open access for Brunel using open science tools like Core and Lantern. And we found far more activity beyond our local request-driven services. Open access is a global movement, and policy disruption is failing to recognise shared open activity when this happens away from the institution. And this activity is not captured by institutional systems. This is a problem for institutional services whose role it is to support a cultural change within their communities. We argue that much more needs to be done to incentivise a genuine culture of openness across all research outputs, and tools that measure the transition will, in the long run, be more effective than managing compliance. Let's talk about the effects of technological disruption and how this is driving change. The 101 Innovations Project and Altmetric movements have done great work in raising the consciousness of the community. Modern scholarship contains a breadth of new dissemination platforms that stretch within and beyond the boundaries of our institution. And this is reflected in our research, which we liken to the metaphor of the telescope, looking outward from our institution to the busy and collaborative universe of open research activity. When we ran Brunel's publications list through Core, we found 3 times as many papers appearing across the world's repository network. And this reveals what we already knew anecdotally, namely that research and open publishing is a shared enterprise that crosses institutional and territorial boundaries. When we added additional tools like Lantern and DOAJ, we found clear evidence that our institution was on a slow but progressive trajectory toward open scholarship. And these tools gave us a means to assess global open research activity as it pertains to our institution. Importantly, we identified the ground to cover. Sherpa Ref revealed 40% of papers that did not take an available green OA option, and 10% of publishers that did not allow for any self-archiving. Surely this is where our efforts need to be focused. We need visibility on the wider picture of open access, regardless of which co-authoring institution paid a fee and regardless of which repository was used. Only with a more complete picture can we target those within our institution who need our help and support. Let's talk about the effects of policies, the most ground-shaking, of course, being HEFCEs. Policies certainly have an impact and are certainly driving action, but are we inspiring genuine cultural change and ensuring that open practice is embedded for the long term? We applaud many aspects of this policy, but the present implementation fails to reward researchers already engaged with open scholarship and doesn't support natural and evolving workflows led by scholars and highlighted by our research and 101 innovations. We're already seeing the negative effects of perverse incentives. For example, researchers choosing to make open access only those outputs that they wish to put forward for ref. We're not against policies, they are clearly essential drivers for change. However, the severity of inefficiencies on policy and technology fronts are frustrating the cause of affecting true cultural change.
So as a result of this complex policy terrain, library staff are now spending considerable time monitoring institutional compliance and providing clarification to confused academics. This has led to a very singular focus, looked at through individual systems which do not always take into account the collaborative nature of open scholarship. Now, by following an institutional compliance-based approach, action is guaranteed. For example, to comply with HEFCE, academics will start to deposit their accepted manuscripts in repositories. However, whilst this route will undoubtedly provoke action from the group highlighted in this bottom chart, that's those who have previously not followed any kind of open access path, in doing so, we might also begin to constrain those in the top graph, which is those already participating in open practices, by funneling them down a very particular route to OA, which suits our own institutional systems for capturing compliance. The question therefore becomes whether an institutional compliance-based approach actually captures the different open publishing and dissemination workflows out there. From our research, the indication is no. Our research indicates that by viewing OA purely through localized systems, it's a bit like looking through a telescope the wrong way round. We only see things through a very narrow focus. This may then create a duplication of effort by academics and layers of bureaucracy that prevent us from understanding wider engagement with open practices. So this is a common response I receive from academic colleagues, such as my co-author did this at their institution, or someone else is already paying an APC. What seems to be required here is the ability to aggregate open activities globally and then scale them back down to an institutional level. We recently did this talk, a very similar talk at the RL UK conference, and a couple of people pointed out that a compliance-based approach does work, and we're certainly not disputing that. What our research has highlighted, however, is twofold. Firstly, institutional systems do not capture collaborative activity very well or communicate with the wider range of open platforms used by researchers. Secondly, there is a risk that a compliance-based system for open access undermines some of the wider philosophical aims of the movement, which is surely to see open access as just the starting point to wider public engagement. This was picked up at our recent OA conference at Brunel, where Cameron Nayland pointed out that OA has sometimes felt a little bit like libraries chucking books over a wall and hoping that the public will pick them up. Nayland pointed out that the ultimate aim is to knock down these walls entirely and move towards a fully open environment, which entails two-way public communication. This should be the ultimate goal of open access, and there is the possibility that this message is being lost due to a very heavy focus on compliance, especially if this form of compliance is narrowly concentrated on isolated institutional systems. Thank you very much for listening.